Hello, Jack Tame and live streaming world. Welcome and good afternoon to you, sir.
Kia ora. How you doing?
I mean, we're never really on.
You look great, Pat, but I'm sensing there might be a little bit of tension in the Britton
I
household.
don't, I don't want to. And with the good, I always think I can't remember what movie it was, but there was a movie that talked about putting your troubles into a bubble and blowing them away. It's like I just need to children, kids.
I don't think it's very practical necessarily. Yeah, right. Okay.
No,
Yeah,
I
what are we?
we were
Week like 6 or something with kids at home,
no,
and
yeah.
mm,
I just don't. I know we don't ever really start this thing on time because you don't need to. We don't have to have that Q and
no,
A,
no,
those Q and A
lose.
pips or anything. We just start talking.
No, you just
But
do it. Yeah.
but of course, they got the kids this week, and it's fantastic. I didn't have them for 4 weeks; they were with their mum. Got them this week, which is delightful. I'm loving it. Um, we're all playing.
Keep blowing that, blow
We're
that
all
bubble away.
we're all playing Fortnite together, and I made it very
Oh,
clear that I've got a podcast this afternoon. Starts at
yeah.
1:30. So you, 13-year-old, you need to go and do your, paper
Oh,
delivery. Paper delivery.
oh,
I want you. I
right.
want you out of the house before I start because then things, I don't have to think about someone leaving the house. And so of course it gets to 1:15, and the game of Fortnite is just about to wrap. And I said that's fine. You can go after that. And then doesn't have this, doesn't have that, doesn't have the phone, doesn't know where the phone is. Meltdown over not being able to leave the house without the phone. And I'm just like, okay. There's a really good clip, and I don't know if we've talked about it before, but I've talked about it dozens of times, by a guy called Simon Sinek, who talks about millennials and their phone, and I guess now Generation Z and their phone, and how it fires off the synapses in your head like cocaine and alcohol does.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated. I'm thinking, I mean, you're a millennial, you're of that
Yeah.
age.
I'm a millennial. I'm like an old millennial, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm an Xer, even though with the grey I now look like a boomer apparently, but I'm a Gen X, um, and I have these. I've said to my kids ever since they were little, you guys have to understand what it means to be bored. You have to be able to be bored and not constantly be entertained. And I can remember sitting like on a Sunday after a cricket practice at St Peter's College in central Auckland, and because the buses only came every hour or even hour and a half, you miss the one by 2 minutes, so you're sitting there for an hour and a quarter doing nothing. And it's
Mm.
like it's actually a skill to learn. And so watching my middle,
I think there's a real I mean, like, I'm as addicted to my phone as anyone else, right? And so much of our work these days involves social media and all that sort of thing.
yeah,
Um, and I have a real love-hate relationship. Like, I get pleasure from my phone, but at the same time, I find myself sitting down to watch something, or even when I'm trying to, like I'll be zooming my family or something, and
yep,
I find myself just automatically refreshing my phone. It's really unhealthy.
yeah.
Um, and so I hate that. But at the same time, I think the biggest problem with not being bored is that boredom allows for creativity. And like, there's just this, like you say, there is probably a generation or two
Yeah.
of people who have been brought up never really knowing boredom, and maybe never benefiting from the creativity that comes from being bored. Because if your brain is always stimulated, first of all, it's no wonder there's so much anxiety everywhere.
Yeah.
But also, like, you never give your brain kind of an opportunity to take different paths and to subconsciously explore different things, and so you're never creative in that same way. I think that's a real loss. Yeah.
I think evidence of that, and I'm going to say that this probably resonates with everyone, but it's certainly how I operate, is often you have those, oh yeah, moments like in the shower, or for me,
Mhm.
on the wharepaku, or, sometimes when your brain isn't necessarily engaged, although I think a lot of us still have our phones on the toilets these days, but especially in the shower, yeah, it's
Shower's a good
one.
one. Exercise is the other one, right?
Mm,
Like, they reckon that it's a real Silicon Valley thing too, to like take an hour-long walk a day without your phone and to see what happens. Because when you are just forced to reckon with your immediate physical environment,
yeah,
and your brain doesn't have the stimulus of notifications or of news updates or of your friends liking your photos or any of that, then all of a sudden, yeah, it can allow for creativity. I mean, that
yeah,
that's for many thousands of years. That's how human beings have come up with new stuff. And it's interesting to consider a world where we don't have that. I mean, I'm sure we have other ways, that we can be innovative these days. But I still think, I worry about that.
Yeah, it's like that old, I mean, it's more of maybe an American sort of picture, but that old adage of, sitting on the porch in the rocking chair, whittling wood. Just literally sit there. There's no point in whittling wood. You're literally just cutting shavings off it, but there's your thinking time.
There's a balance, isn't there? I mean,
yeah. You know what? I wonder if there's a game. I wonder if there's an app where you can whittle wood. Like, I wonder if someone's done a virtual whittling wood thing. They probably have.
I remember traveling in Asia in, I don't know, maybe 2007, 2008. It was sort of just before phones were really prevalent in places like India and China. These days, almost every single person in those countries would have a phone.
Right.
But I remember one of the things that struck me then about being in India was that people were obviously underemployed and understimulated. Same thing actually in places like Cuba. And so they would just kind of sit out all day and just watch the world go by, just sit outside a shop or sit outside their house and just sit on the side of the road, on the curb, in the dirt, wherever, and just watch the world go by.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was such a that was like a sentence, worse than death. Like, that was just the worst thing, to be that
Really?
kind of underemployed, just to be passing the days for 8 or 10 hours a day, sitting there watching the world go by, seemed horrible. So I think maybe there's a happy balance to be had.
Yeah.
Somewhere between sitting there watching the world go by and never ever having a moment away from your phone.
I always like, when I've looked at houses, and I've lived in, I don't know, 30 houses as an adult, when you're a student and you're in your 20s and stuff, you tend to do a different house every year. Is the ones that I always used to be attracted to most of all was the ones with a front stoop, with the stairs that go up to the front door. The Bill Cosby kind of house. Not that we want to talk about what we're not there, because there's something about sitting out there and, with a cigar or a beer or whatever, and with your mates and just sitting there and chatting is something that I like. And I realize I like meetings. Some people hate meetings. I like meetings. I like getting around a table and chewing over ideas with people. And I wonder if it's part of the same sort of vibe of just, even though meeting is obviously more focused, that just kind of hanging out and talking about shit.
You bounce off people. That's your nature, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Hey, it's lovely to speak to you. Last time we had you were in our in one of our studios. Now you're in my bedroom. Welcome.
Yeah, how do you? So, talk me through this light situation.
This one back here.
Yeah,
that's my porn. That's my porn star set.
I mean, it does don't take this the wrong way. It doesn't look very it doesn't look very relaxing.
To be honest with you, I have had to move.
Very like calendar girls at 4 a.m.
Yeah, this is my porn star set. I put them up specifically when I started doing this in my bedroom during the COVID crisis, simply for something in the background that wasn't ugly 90s yellow paint over the top of terrible wallpaper, because that is my bedroom. Like, if you saw this corner here, you'd see where all the actual wallpaper has been put up poorly by the people before me, and it's bubbling in the corner. So really, that's just up there. But you know what? That thing changes colours, and actually, I've started using it at night time as like a bedside lamp. I put it on white, and I turn the volume right down, and actually, it's quite a nice light in the room. I use it when I come. Yeah, it's not bad.
Where do you even buy something like that?
I think those are Amazon. I've got them. Why I got them is they're LED strips, and the studio. We were in a different studio from the one you came to.
They look like tubes here.
They're flat. They're flat with a sticky back, and you actually stick them on things. And so the idea was they were going to go on the backs of the TVs in the studio, and then throw like a blue wash up on the wall. You came to our temporary studio. We moved into a permanent studio, which was just the business. And unfortunately, because of this COVID crisis, we're going to have to move out of that. But I'm quite excited to say I'm going to build a studio downstairs in my house. And and set, like, so at the moment I'm using one camera, and this is actually our backup mics, and I've got my backup desk. And I'm going to set it up properly. And although I'm gutted to be leaving the space we had, which we managed to film 3 podcasts in, all this time and effort and energy and stuff, and we did 3 podcasts in it, I'm gutted to be leaving there. There's something about having all my gears downstairs just going... like I'm expecting a couple of podcasts to pop up, like you today. We talked 2 hours ago. Should we do it today? Yeah. If I was in the studio, I wouldn't have done that. Got the kids at home, can't do it.
Yeah.
So there's something about that idea.
Agility, Pat. I call that agility. Yeah.
And also now, and I think for the last kind of 6 or 7 years, the world has been accepting of lesser quality content, the look of content, like CNN and those started to use Skype, people Skyping in, and even TVNZ using that. Sometimes you see at the bottom of the thing via internet because they're using an internet feed rather than using a up to the satellite sort of thing. And I actually think now that Zoom has become so prevalent, and I've done a few of these podcasts where I've had a mic on my end and Steve Wrigley's had a mic on the other end or whatever. It sounds as good as studio to studio. There's no need for things like ISDNs and that anymore for radio stations or Comrexes or that kind of stuff that you'll be well used to. These are good enough. And so I actually think having a full studio downstairs is probably going to open up all sorts of opportunities as well, which I'm quite excited about, actually. Could be stage 3 of the podcast world.
How long will it take you to build a studio down there, guys?
Building the wall. I've got a family room downstairs that's sort of 10 metres by 4 metres. I'm building the wall this weekend. I've ordered French doors, glass inlaid French doors from Christchurch. They'll hopefully be here early next week. So to give some more natural light. I've basically got the walls. I've just got to build another wall across the middle, and then I just got to move my stuff. I could have a fully operational studio within 7 days of now if I wanted to.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had the Sparky in. Yes, it was really weird in this current crisis. Had a Sparky come in yesterday, and like no handshake. I mean, like appropriately.
It is weird, that stuff, Yeah. The no physical contact, and then you're like doing the awkward, like, hey, you're like all that shit. Yeah. It's weird, eh?
Yeah.
It's I reckon it's starting to slip though, don't you think?
Surely you've seen, if people haven't seen this, go onto Facebook and just look up Burger Fuel Glenfield. And there was a photo on that day 1 of level 3. And honestly, 50 people outside Burger Fuel in Glenfield queuing normally.
Yeah. I wondered, I mean, that was ridiculous. But I did wonder about the perspective of the photo and that sort of thing. I don't know, like just looking... Where I live, I can kind of see some of the motorways in Auckland, and looking out over the city, the quantities of traffic at level 3 compared to level 4, it's like another world. There would be literally 20 times as many cars on the road. I reckon.
What is it though compared to say what rush hour was prior to the lockdown?
It's still not as hard out as rush hour.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I feel because at the moment, basically, most businesses are open except for retail and hospitality, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of cafes and stuff are trying to do takeaway food.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess if they can open at level 2, then it's going to feel relatively normal, and if kids can go back to school. But I think the kids not being at school is, I mean, you would know more than me, but that's such a big kind of burden in terms of like, from an economic perspective as well, you know.
I saw a headline.
People who thought like, I could do heaps of work from home, and they're like, no.
I saw a headline as I pick up my cell phone because, as we say, we're all addicted to them. I was hoping that I'd be able to see what the headline was. I didn't read the story, but the headline I think said, I mean, you probably know this. You're a journalist, or maybe you've read it, or maybe it's come from one of the groups you're working with, maybe the Herald it was. That I think it said 3% of children back at 1% of children back at school, 3% back at daycare. So it seems that parents, even though obviously it is more a burden and more difficult, are still going, we're not ready to put our kids back in yet.
Yeah, and I think my understanding is that schools have made it like they've really said to parents, like, please, for any parent who are like, hey, we're going to bring our kids in next week, school was like, are you 100% sure? Do you really need to do this? And the kids who are at school, like it's much more fun for kids to be at home, even with the restrictions, than it is to be at school.
Totally.
Like they're not allowed close to each other. They're not allowed to do anything. They can't just go and like play on the playground or anything like that. It's not going to school at the moment is not fun, and it's not social. They're not hanging out. So I think it just makes I think it makes total sense that there aren't that many people on the current restriction who have decided to go.
Yeah.
But I think at level 2, it'll be, it'll be all go, I reckon. But it's so hard. I mean, like, how do you, if you can't keep people social distancing at Burger Fuel and Glenfield, then how are you going to get like 36-year-olds? Okay, everyone stay a meter apart. Like, it's not going to happen.
Well, we had, we started off by being a homeschooling family. And we were a homeschooling family because my eldest had epilepsy back when she was 4. And we didn't realize this at the time, but what we basically did was, long story short, we went, we got to get this sorted out properly. Let's forget about school and just go down the homeschooling path to start with, and we'll get this thing sorted out. Now, long story short, it was sorted out by the time she was 5 and a half, easily. But we already started down that path, so we went down it. So we've done this a bit before. I mean, I'm not with the kid's mother anymore, but she's just next door, literally. We share a boundary. So, so we've sort of done this a little bit before, and I know, and people who have done homeschooling before or even know about it will understand that normally, if you work well, if the kids work well, you can get through the schoolwork far quicker than a school day. So I'm being a little bit of a school Nazi at the moment. I threatened my kids yesterday that if they weren't at the dining room table by 9 doing schoolwork, I would make them get in their school uniforms and come and sit at the dining room table. And I would. And I actually think that they should get into their school uniforms to do one of their school Zooms, because I think that would be hilarious. But I'm basically...
They'd never live it down.
That'd be fantastic. I'm basically saying to them, look, and I'm sitting at the table with them working. I'm like, work hard, play hard. Let's kick ass for 3 or 4 hours, from breakfast until lunch at 12:31, whatever, and then let's play. Let's play PlayStation. Yeah. We're allowed to leave the property yet. We were going to go up to a beach, although the weather's not so good today, a bit further up the coast, but still within our region. As the PM has said, we can stay in our region. And so that's what we're doing. And the 10-year-old Zooms in with her teacher every day. The other two who are both at high school, have got a list of things to do and work towards, and are pretty independent, and we're cracking. I quite like it. I mean, it's easy. If I was still at the studio, this would be more difficult, but I like having the kids around in general. I mean, I'm pulling my hair out today, but that's only one incident. But in general, we're mates, we're fun. We've started watching
Don't you think, though, like, how incredibly lucky we are that this has happened now and not 20 years ago? I just mean that generally. Like, imagine being in your situation now, but not being able to rely. Like, okay, whose turn is it on Carter next? Like, it's just the fact that we can have the level of connectivity that we have now, and all sorts of entertainment, whether it's Netflix or playing Fortnite online or whatever. Like, we're just so lucky to have this level of entertainment, because especially for level 4, I kept on thinking in the early days, like, God, imagine how hard prison must be. Like,
well,
in prison, I mean, like, it's hard enough, like, basically eating whatever you want except for takeaways, but you can eat, there's no restrictions on how many times you can go to the supermarket, really. You can watch as much TV or whatever as you want, whenever you want. You just have to stay home, and you're allowed out to exercise, and yet people are still losing their minds. It's like, well, imagine doing a 20-year sentence or something. We've got these... A little bit different, I know. A little bit different.
Yeah. But I know what you're saying, because we've got these delightful little rabbits, little small ones with the lop ears. I think it's what they call lop ear rabbits. They are disgustingly cute. Like, it's the kind of thing that they look at you and you kind of go, it's criminal how cute that thing is. Yeah. And I'm not one of these people who goes, let's watch all the cutesies videos on YouTube. But these things, and they're very, very... I was going to say humanized, whatever the word is, for they're used to being around humans. So you walk past them and they climb up on their cage to kind of say, hi, I'm here, pick me up. We've got an outside cage for them in an inside cage, and they're pretty big and pretty spacious. But I did think in that last week of lockdown, seeing them in their inside area, they do run around the house as well, but they have a home sort of in there. I kind of go, shit, mate, I'm feeling it a bit. I kind of get this restriction thing, so it's not quite prison, but I had a little example in my room, and I kind of went, yeah, and then we figured out how to give them a bigger run. So it's like I got it a little bit. I also think what you're talking about us going backwards, I saw that through that 4.5 week period. I didn't go to the supermarket at all, but I did go to a fresh fruit and veggie store that was an essential outlet. So I have a chest freezer, and we had plenty of meat and that kind of stuff. The fruit and veggie store that I go to, they sell milk and stuff. They also deliver. So we got a delivery one week, and I went in a couple of times. But that's all we did. I had everything else backed up. I'm one of these people who has an over.
My week, honestly, I was like, yes. Today's from being in. Usually, it's like, oh, go to the supermarket. I was like, yeah, off to countdown.
I'm the opposite. I love the supermarket. Yeah. It's good fun.
Yeah.
But I went out in the first week, maybe it was the second week, and from my house to this veggie shop is probably 12 k's. As in Dunedin, it's the other side of town, from North Dunedin to South Dunedin, basically. So maybe 8 k's. All right.
Why are you going that far?
Because it's the best value fruit and veggies in Dunedin.
Yeah, but surely, like the petrol you're spending in driving those 25 k's is like,
yeah. But anyway.
Fair enough. Anyway, whatever you do, you. Yeah.
Thank you. And I might have come across 2 or 3 cars during the trip, and then I went there in week 3, and I came past like 20 cars. Still pretty quiet, but significantly different. And then I went there in the days leading up to the the shutting, the level 3 opening. 100 cars. So I think through that lockdown period as well, people became more comfortable with the idea of lockdown and what they were allowed to. So like in those first few weeks, I think we were all kind of locking ourselves in our houses, kind of going, not going to go out, not going out, and then sort of figured it out. But I can understand how it goes from relaxing during the lockdown to I have freedom. Whereas what they've really said is pretty much things stay the same. You can expand your bubble a little bit. You can go to work, but don't change your social interactions. Don't socialize. And so it feels. So I heard someone talk about it as level 3.9 at one stage.
I think Judith Collins said it's like level 4 with KFC.
Right, yeah. But we haven't seen that. And there are, like, I took a little video as I was driving past a McDonald's the other day, and 60 cars. I'm like, what the? I mean, honestly, I get that people like McDonald's, but honestly, this was the day after. Are you really that desperate for a terrible burger rather than going to a decent burger place?
Yeah, it's not my cup of tea either, to be honest. Although I did look forward to some takeaways, but I was hardly. I just don't eat. I never eat McDonald's. But like there's no food to me that is worth. Like, I love food, but there's no food that is worth queuing up for like 60 cars worth to me.
Yeah.
No thanks. See you later.
Yeah, no. I'm the same. In fact, that's often, like if you go to a like a beer festival or something, and there's queues of 40 or 50 people, it's like I just don't get it. It's not my bag. I mean, maybe when I was younger, it was a part of the vibe. You'd queue up for stuff and that, but nothing's that good.
I remember covering when I was living in New York, I had to cover the cronut. Remember the cronut craze?
I did.
Like croissant and donut thing. And I remember having to go down to outside this bakery at like 4 o'clock in the morning to film people. And people have been there since 3 a.m. queuing. And I was just like, what are you people doing with your lives?
Yeah.
It's like I love a pastry, don't get me wrong. I love it. It's delicious, I'm sure. But just step back from them and look at yourselves. You're queuing in the street at 3:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, so you can have a croissant. Like, what are you doing?
That speaks also more to the way things like viral media works. Because when those came out, I actually was flatting with someone in West Auckland who ran a cafe. And they were delicious. There is no question about those things. They were wonderful. But the It's the not even that it was actively marketed, but it's that viral idea that this is now the thing to have. It's like I was watching. I think it would have been 3 News last night. No, maybe it was The Project. I had Corby on a couple of days ago, and I thought I'd catch up with him on The Project. It was up for, and he had on Benny, who has had another song of hers go to TikTok and become quite viral.
Oh yeah, I've interviewed her for radio this weekend actually.
Yeah, and that went from one girl doing one dance to now there's 500,000 versions of it being done on TikTok. You know, that one person that does one thing is like the one cafe that sells the cronut. Something happens in between. It's the same as anything actually. We talk about like this podcast. Doesn't matter how good or bad something is, a business, a content, there often needs to be a break or a particular thing that happens to actually send it into the stratosphere or send it to the next stage where it becomes successful. And that's what seems to be with those sorts of things. Something happens somewhere. Maybe fucking Kylie Jenner ate one or something, and that was the thing that became the hot trend.
Like it's like the watershed moment.
Yeah,
it's funny though because you can't. It's very hard to predict what that moment will be. I mean, I think if Kylie Jenner does anything, that it seems to do pretty well. But if you but you know what I mean. Like it's very hard to kind of manufacture that moment. I mean, there must be so many brands that have spent millions of dollars trying to manufacture viral hits, but have failed miserably.
Yeah.
It's one of those, it's this sort of unpredictable human nature things too, don't you think?
Yeah, it's one of those things that businesses need to be aware of when talking to marketers, doing a little bit of that on the side as well, is that when they talk about making you some viral content, they don't know what they're talking about. Because by definition, you know, viral catches on for no real reason. And actually people promising that sort of opportunity is nonsense. They can promise good content or catchy content or whatever, but I've seen it. I've seen people talking about we'll make you a viral video, and I'm like, just be aware of those people because you can't.
With that, you
can't do that.
I think I remember there was some. I can't remember. It was either a marketing course or like a digital media thing at some college in America where the university professor said your goal, whoever makes like a viral video with the most hits.
Yep.
By the end of the semester wins. I don't know if you've seen it.
Haven't seen it.
And one that won was some incredibly talented graphic designer or editor or whatever made this like kind of grainy looking film where an eagle sweeps down and picks up a dog. Yeah. Like a kid is playing with a dog in the backyard, and the dog and this eagle goes and takes the dog or cat or like their family pet anyway. And the kid's like screaming, and it looks really legitimate because it's kind of shaky cell phone video, mid 2000s or whatever. And this thing had like 500 million hits in the space of a week because it looked so extreme. And it was all bullshit. It was all totally manufactured. But I always thought, what an amazing assignment that is.
Yeah, that's
like
clever.
A really simple assignment. Just whoever makes a video that gets the most hits on YouTube by the end of the semester wins.
And one of the ironies being, if one of the students had literally caught some kind of event, a JFK shooting sort of thing, without any work at all, they would have won it easily. Hence the idea of the viral thing.
Yeah, totally.
It's it is an interesting time. It's interesting as well. I mean, I've talked to a few people during this time involved in the media. We had Mike McRoberts on, and as I said, we had Corby on, and obviously yourself. I'm interested in the vibe around TVNZ at the moment. I know that there's kind of separate teams operating for the news, like there's a day team and a night team to keep people away from each other. Does any of that happen with Q&A? Have you got like separate teams, or are you just is Q&A its own bubble? How does it go?
Yeah, no, it's TVNZ's got so basically only news people are at work. Mm-hmm. This is my understanding. This is how I understand it at the moment, and I don't think it's changed. But there's certainly only news people at work. 2 teams, red and a blue, and so you do kind of like 5 days on, 2 days off, and then they rotate the teams. The idea being that if one of the teams had gone down, then the other team would have kind of held out for the next few weeks.
Yep.
Which would have been a big ask. For me, I'm team red. but our team has been split as well. But we kind of made the decision early on: if you don't need to be in the newsroom, don't be in the newsroom.
Right.
And that's kind of been the message. So I basically only am going into the office when I'm literally on air in the studio. Same with ZB at the moment, and the rest of the time just working from home.
So are you still going into ZB? I mean, I would think, especially with your experience from New York,
yeah,
broadcasting out of New York.
I'm going into ZB, but we've got they've got, like, we've all got our own mic socks, and then there's this whole kind of protocol for when you leave the studio and that sort of thing. And there are neither TVNZ or Newstalk has any like in-person guests at the moment.
Yep.
And I guess for Q&A, that's one of the difficult elements in that. Ours is an interview show, and most of the interviews, they're about as long as you will see on TV in this day and age, and that they might be 8 or 10 minutes long, which is actually nothing, but as long as it gets on telly these days.
Yeah.
And so you're relying on Skype and Zoom, which can be kind of temperamental, especially in the evenings when everyone's streaming Netflix and stuff. So we've had a couple of occasions when like things have dropped out. It's like, and then that's a big hole to fill,
right?
Like a 10-minute hole, So on the back of my mind, I'm like, if we don't get this up, this is going to be a lot of me talking. But for the most part, it's actually worked really well, and we're very fortunate. Like at TVNZ, we haven't had people with COVID, and so. And all the protocols seem to have worked pretty efficiently. The other thing I would say is that news people love a crisis.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that we're like willing the nation to be in the grips of a pandemic. I just mean that when you have, by their nature, journalists and they're kind of used to reacting to emergencies and crises and things.
Of course.
So when you are thrown into different working environments, there's a real kind of collective pull together thing. The same thing happened when there was that fire at Sky City last year. Do you remember that?
Yeah, for sure.
And so TVNZ was kicked out. We were kicked out for, I can't even remember, maybe a week or two. And we were working out of the Spark building for a few days. But it was almost like being on school camp or something. And then everyone's kind of and then there's like a muesli bar station, and everyone's kind of excited. I think that excitement's probably worn off now. But the funny thing is, for media everywhere, us and for Media Works, we are the ratings for TVNZ right now, and particularly for TV1, are astronomical.
Yeah, of course.
Astronomical. I mean, I think this is right. I could be wrong, but so a week ago on the Monday, that 4:00 announcement that Jacinda Ardern and Ashley Bloomfield made about when we would move to level 3. That was the highest viewed news event in New Zealand on TV, and certainly on TVNZ1, since 9/11.
Right.
Wow. There were more people watching that moment than anything else. But of course, for all the viewers, no advertisers want to spend any money at the moment.
And this is part of the conversation I've been having with other media people. I mean, just to the point, though, I would still say that the most enjoyable and best broadcasting I've ever done was the day the Twin Towers was hit. I was on air when the Twin Towers were hit, working for More FM.
Most enjoyable?
Well, not the content.
I know what you mean. There's like a surge of adrenaline, right? That comes when you are broadcasting in a moment that is, you get a sense like this has real historical significance. You know that it's a big deal. There's a thrill.
When I look back over, I was going to say my career, whatever. When I look back over my life, these will be the things I talk about being involved with.
Yeah.
It was, and I was working for More FM, so we weren't a news outlet, but I was on air when it happened, and I was young, and I was like, "Holy crap, what do I do?" And then actually, who I just talked to, Kim and Corbett were on that morning, and I stayed through the breakfast show and basically produced and got drops and all that kind of stuff. So when I say enjoyed, I guess I mean not enjoyed like I would enjoy a comedy festival, but enjoyed like it was gratifying. I felt like I'd done an amazing job. I had offered what I could and felt really proud of the work. That's what I mean by enjoyed. And then the the other one was I was on air when the first Christchurch quake happened, the one in the middle of the night. So those two periods are the ones that stand out for me. And so these times of adversity that you referenced previously, I that resonates with that quite a lot. It's also we had on a guy called Mike Dickerson last year, I think. They call him New Zealand's only Wikipedian, and he's actually got a grant from Wikipedia to go around and teach people in New Zealand how to use Wikipedia. And when the Christchurch, I'm just kind of thinking about how media is starting to change. When the Christchurch massacre happened, he informs me that a lot of places were seeking some information from the Wikipedia page that was started in New Zealand immediately, because it was then becoming almost like an RSS feed of getting all the information from other places and becoming quite a reliable source of what was going on, but like in real time almost, which I think is fascinating because, again, you talk about money. It doesn't really cost anything to run. TVNZ, TV3, New Zealand Herald, ZB.
So it doesn't cost anything to run?
Well, we don't pay for it, and they don't, and there's not advertising on it. It's basically based on donations. So you obviously...
Wikipedia doesn't cost.
Yeah. So
I thought you meant like TV. I was like, yo.
No.
No. Yeah. No, you're right.
And so it's interesting to think about costings of money.
But here's my question for you. Like, where does the Wikipedia content come from?
Yeah, from people. Yeah.
No, but you got to verify everything, right? Like, often all sources need to be verified.
Yeah.
And so most of the sources are TVNZ or the Herald or ZB or anything else like that. It's not just like Gary from down the road says this happened, so it happened. And I think Wikipedia is an amazing resource and like an incredibly, like, it's so easy, it's so like cheap for people to be like, oh, where did you read that? Wikipedia? So, well, actually, Wikipedia for the most part is an incredible example of what happens when you crowdsource information, but then actually build in some checks.
Yeah.
I'd be far more inclined to believe something I read on Wikipedia than on Facebook. But I would also know that the fact that you have all of your sources usually cited, preferably verified, but you have them listed down the bottom. I think Wikipedia is just great to be able to go, and I'm always like, okay, I'll go to 36 and see what that says. Like you say, it's almost like an RSS feed.
But the point you made, which I think is important for people to understand, and I think the best example is Sky Sport, is like people complain about Sky Sport, people complain about paying for the rugby, yada, 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 yada. And so people take live free streams and that kind of stuff. And I saw a conversation actually with the wife, I won't say who it is, but with the wife of quite a high-profile sports presenter. And the point they made was, but Sky pays for all of this. This is the reason that it's such good coverage is it costs a lot to do it. So there is like you're saying about who pays for the content for Wikipedia, they cite TVNZ, there's a TVNZ cost to that. So it's this conversation at the moment about media moving forward and what happens with the costs and how do we pay for it.
Like Wikipedia wouldn't be nearly, Wikipedia would be near useless unless you had reliable sources of information from which it could source its kind of collaborations, right? And so that's, I don't know. I mean, I think media's in crisis, is just totally in crisis at the moment. And I have no idea how things are going to shake down in the years and months ahead. I just think there's going to have to be massive, massive change. But I also think that, it's an interesting question about values that most people just take for granted, because we've always had these TV channels for free.
Yeah.
We just kind of expect that they can survive, and we expect that we can be given news and given information and given entertainment for free. I say for free because you're still getting bombarded with Briscoe's ads and Harvey Norman ads and stuff. That's the price you pay. But the newspapers, like the stuffs in NZ Heralds and ODTs of the world, they produce maybe as like individual stories, they're a lot cheaper to produce because a lot of those stories they're just someone on a phone in an office calling up and finding out what happened. What do you think? What do you think? Cool, thanks. I'll write a few sentences. Move on. And TV, you got to turn up with a camera and all of that sort of stuff. But they produce vastly more content in terms of stories than the TV networks can do, or any, like RNZ can do alone. And I just think, like for a century, for more than that, most people have been happy to pay for newspapers.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when we went online, they kind of followed the scale model as opposed to the financial longevity model.
Yep.
And it's the same thing that Uber does now, right? Like startups now, they go for scale rather than profitability early. So it's not important whether or not you're profitable in the early days. It's the race to become the biggest dog in town. And in a way, digitally, Stuff and the Herald kind of did that. I think with the grand benefit of hindsight, it was probably a mistake that they didn't immediately charge for online access to stories 20 years ago in New Zealand.
Like the premium content type thing, or you think absolutely pay
No.
in front?
I mean, maybe premium content, or I just think it's really hard once you've, in the eyes of your readers, been giving away content for free online for 20 years to then be like, oh, now it's time to pay for it. But it's weird, right? Because we'd always been happy to pay for that information. For newspapers have existed for 150, 200 years.
Yep.
And we'd always been happy to pay for that. I grew up, my parents always had a newspaper at the end of the driveway. I'd go up and get it every morning. That was just something that everyone did. Most families would get a newspaper. But then all of a sudden we went to these digital models. Slowly those newspaper subscriptions started to drop off because people thought, well, I'm going to have more up-to-date information online and it's free. Why wouldn't I just go there? It might not have the nice aesthetic quality of holding newsprint in my hands, but it's faster, it's easier, and it's certainly cheaper. And now we're going, oh, actually, no, we need you to pay for it. It's a really, really hard sell. And, with the benefit of hindsight, I wonder if, and it's easier to say this now, but I wonder if it just would have been smarter from the word go to say, you can enter your subscription details here and have access to everything, but we're still going to charge, or we're going to charge you a reduced rate or whatever, but we're going to charge you from the word go. Because now both Stuff and the Herald are kind of trying to put the genie back in the bottle, and it's tough. It's really tough.
Stuffed, so to speak.
Well, yeah, I hope not. But I think people take it for granted still. Like, journos talk about like, we're a pillar of democracy and all of that, and some of that chat maybe can be a bit overblown. But man, I reckon, I think we'd really we'd only realise how damaging it would be not to have good sources of information, when it was too late.
I've been talking through this lockdown about the way we get out of this. There's two theories. One is the break-even policy, and the two is to be loyal. So the break-even policy talks about if you're, and this is a very specific example, but hopefully it'll give an idea about not needing necessarily to make a bunch of money in this time. Because what we want is when we get through this is for there to be as many people left as possible, especially around the idea of businesses. So if you own a building that's got a bar in it and your mortgage is $1,000 a week, but you can charge $3,000 a week for it, well then at the moment charge the business $1,500 a week, break even. Your client will still stay there. You won't go backwards. And at the end of this whole lockdown, everyone will still be there to be able to open up again. So whatever that version is. So, if you're a Airbnb and we're allowed to travel, in our region, and you can get $150 a night for it, but no one's coming. So charge $60 a night for it. Make a bit of money, give people a chance to travel and come away still. And everyone still kind of just makes do for now. And the other thing about being loyal is, and a good example is Air New Zealand, like being loyal to our carrier. Once we're able to travel and stuff, you can't go to Queensland, so you go to Queenstown. You can't go to France, so you go to Whakatane, these sorts of things. But the flip side to that, and this is coming back
to Whakatane.
Well,
no insult to Whakatane, but it's
you can't go to France, go to Whakatane.
Well, we were gonna have a nice summer in the Loire Valley, but instead, Bay of Plenty, what's happening?
can't go to Panama, go to Pukekohe. How about that?
Yeah.
So, but there's a reciprocality that needs to happen. Is that Air New Zealand needs to be loyal back to their customers as well. And if they can afford to charge $60 from Auckland to Nelson, then during this period they should. I think the same needs to happen with the media. I really liked that you've said from from someone within the media that maybe it was a mistake that the media didn't start charging at the start. Because remember, we, the consumer, and look, I'm talking about a listener and a reader now rather than someone hosting a digital piece of media. We've played by media rules, I've taken all the advertising. Those were the rules that were put in front of us. Radio stations. Yeah. I've listened to all the advertising, so I've played by your rules. I've read all the newspaper adverts. So now you set the rules. I've played by them. If you're going to change the rules because these rules are now no longer working for you, then I want some loyalty back as well. So maybe that will be. I'll be loyal to you. I'll be loyal to you. Let's say ODT because I'm in Otago, right? And I'll keep buying my paper, or I'll buy an online subscription. But maybe the way you're loyal back to me is you have like you've said, have a low price, a low entry point, something that goes on. So then I can still get my content. I can give you something towards that content. You can get something for it to keep going. And let's readdress this in 18 months from now and see what happens from there.
I think like the massive elephant in the room is just Facebook and Google. And like when in the early days of stuff and NZ Herald Online, like those platforms didn't exist. Yeah. I remember I was working in a newsroom in 2006, and I think it was the Virginia Tech massacre in the States, maybe. I'm guessing it was back in 2006, 2007.
Yep.
And there was a Kiwi guy who was over there, and I was trying to get in contact with him. And he was on Facebook, and I'd not really heard of Facebook, but I had a friend at college in America who's like, "Oh yeah, Facebook's this big thing." So I signed up to Facebook and said to work, "Oh, I've contacted this guy through Facebook," and everyone was like, "What the hell is that?" But it's just completely and utterly changed not just the game, but the entire ecosystem. And is it for the better? I don't think so necessarily.
Better Facebook, for who? The question would be better for who?
I don't think it's better for anyone. I think it's better for maybe that very short term serotonin hit or whatever it is. But apart from that, could anyone? I mean, it's so. If you look at Facebook objectively, it is so clearly feeding you stuff through algorithms that you don't really care about. Do you really care about this random person that you haven't seen in 15 years and wouldn't speak to on the street? Why are you looking at their pics of them taking a saucy photo in their bathroom? What is this shit? and you're losing hours of your life to it every week. There's that, but there's also the bubble thing. I don't think you can overstate how dangerous it is when people are only exposed to ideas they agree with. Yeah,
for sure.
And I remember a couple of years ago, I was living in New York, and I had this Kiwi mate who, and I said, "Oh, let's go and vote. Go to the local consular office and vote together." And he wasn't really very engaged in New Zealand politics, and because I was working in news and was interested in politics, I was quite up to speed with everything that was happening. This is the David Cunliffe election. Oh, my mate said, he said, "So it looks like we were walking into the consular office. He's like, looks like Labor's going to romp in, eh?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, Labor's looking real good, eh?" And I was like, "Mate, I think Labor's going to get hammered in this election. Why do you say that?" And he said, "Oh, well, everyone on Facebook's been saying Labor's great, blah, 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 blah." And it was just that his group of friends on Facebook had been saying, "Oh, yeah, vote Labor this election," or whatever. And it was just, this is hardly, the stakes in the New Zealand election are hardly, and I'm not saying that Facebook manipulated that election result or anything, but it was so interesting to me that a smart, educated guy could still be his perception of the world quite significantly manipulated just by the things that popped up on his timeline with the illusion of randomness.
If everyone was behind paywalls, though, hypothetically, then doesn't Facebook just become a kind of disseminator of product behind paywalls, paywalls? Sorry. If let's say the Herald and stuff and ODT and TVNZ and MediaWorks and NewsHub and all these things were all behind paywalls, which is never going to happen, but let's just say they were, then every time one of those was shared on Facebook, the people would then get directed to the site. And if they wanted to engage in that, like I'm a subscriber to the New York Times. And one of the reasons I'm a subscriber is I keep seeing links and I would click on it and it would say, you've reached the number of free articles for this month. Yeah. And when Super Tuesday came up, they did a special, which was $2 a month, $26 a year. So I went.
So the problem is that the way they run the algorithm now doesn't promote news stories as much as it did. So even a couple of years ago, news story, like this is how, I think Duncan Grieve from the Spinoff talks to this really well, because the spinoffs, a lot of the spinoffs content was really ideal for Facebook sharing, you know, like 100 New Zealand chips, all that sort of shit. And Facebook changed its algorithm overnight, and they just saw traffic plummet, as all new traditional media sources in New Zealand did. And instead, Facebook just started promoting TAT.
Yeah, right.
And that they have no. I would argue that like media organisations in New Zealand are at least tacitly invested in New Zealand society, right?
Sure.
Facebook has absolutely no interest. Facebook does not give a shit about anything except for making as much money for its shareholders as possible. I mean, literally every day I wake up, I have a Facebook page with, like a public Facebook page with, I don't even, like, a few followers, maybe 25,000 followers, 30,000 followers, nothing really. Every single day, I swear to you, every single day, I come on and there's a message from someone, an automated bot message saying, hi, we run a digital marketing company for this thing. Can we pay you to put ads on your Facebook page? I say, mark as spam, mark as spam, mark as spam. Every single day, Facebook comes back and pumps me with that. Last year, or maybe the year before when I was on Breakfast, same thing's actually happening to Hosking at the moment. There was some scammers were running ads on Facebook with my image and Hayley Holt's image saying, Jack and Hayley reveal how they made money out of Bitcoin or thousands of dollars out of Bitcoin or something like that. I had someone write to me the other day about it and said, hey, I'm just about to put some money into this Bitcoin thing you've promoted on Facebook. Now, I must have reported that shit to Facebook a dozen times, me alone, plus all of my colleagues, plus so many people who would have seen it for the scam that it was. Do you think Facebook has prioritized getting that shit off? Absolutely not. They don't care. All they care about is just pumping out clickable content that makes them money.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I don't have the same.
I really think, like Facebook, this sounds extreme, but I really think Facebook in particular is like the single biggest threat to democracy in the world.
Wow.
It's so because it's so pernicious. Like you don't realize what it's doing to you until it's too late. And for the longest time, we're just not exposed to. We're not exposed to ideas we don't agree with necessarily anymore, and it just kind of the way it divides people inevitably leads to these kind of tribal politics that you see in America or Brazil or elsewhere, where all of a sudden everything just gets pushed to the margins, like everything's pushed to the extremes. So it's like everything's really binary. You're with them or you're against them. You like it or you don't like it. And I think it's really worrying. Yeah. We don't tax them.
I think that's a big one, but I also wonder as well, don't disagree with what you're saying at all. I take one step back from that and I go, there is still this filter of human beings in New Zealand who are doing this. And the classic example is, I don't do this a lot, but sometimes when my blood boils a bit when I see, I mean, nothing like yours, but I have people who follow me because of what I've done or what I used to do sort of thing. And, one will pop up on my feed and it'll talk about, how Donald Trump isn't a racist, saying it's a virus from China because COVID stands for Chinese origin of, and it's an acronym and it starts with the word Chinese, to which I take literally 15 seconds to find the Snopes article that says this is what it stands for, this is a lie. That person sitting somewhere in wherever part of the country had to go see that thing and then, and I'll say it, be stupid enough to go, oh, that's real, to then repost it. I
think this is the thing, like Facebook has like exploited the
stupidity.
Most vulnerable things. Yeah, like stupidity, absolutely, but also just the most vulnerable parts of our of our psyches. Like, why is I don't want to waste time looking at these shitty photos of people I don't care about on Facebook and Instagram, but I do. Why? Because there's something chemical in my brain that's like, it's like I'm chemically hardwired. I'm not saying I should take no responsibility whatsoever, but at the same time, like these things are designed by the world's leading mathematicians, design the algorithms, but they're sitting side by side with psychologists who say, well, hang on, if you get that tone of red for the notification, that person's, moderately more likely to click on it. It's going to give them a tiny little hit of serotonin. They're going to want to do exactly the same thing in 1 minute.
Yeah.
But, it's crazy. I've stood there with mates in conversations and they've gone, I'll be like, hey man, how you doing? They're like, yeah, no, but I'll say, yeah, I've had a rough time, da, 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 da. And they'll be talking to her, and then I'll just see my friend just go, yeah, and then just check Instagram, and I'll be like,
we're talking.
What are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing? And they'll be like, oh shit, sorry, oh my god, yeah, I just did it automatically without thinking. I do it automatically all the time without thinking about it.
That's why I'm watching these American comedians at the moment, guys like Dave Chappelle, and I think Joe Rogan's doing it as well. When people come to their shows now, they make them lock their bags up in these lock their phones up in these little bags and leave them outside. They don't want their product to get out.
Taken out of context, Dave. I mean, the comedians thing. Like, I love Dave Chappelle. I love Dave Chappelle. I think he's a genius. I think he says some like controversial things, but I don't know. Personally, I've got to be careful what I say, but I think I want to hear stuff that I disagree with. You know, like I want to hear things that challenge the way I think about stuff. I think one of the most admirable qualities in a person is someone who is genuinely open to changing their mind, because so rarely we go into arguments or discussions or debates actually prepared to change our position on something. And I feel like Dave Chappelle is a real thinker and someone who would challenge me to change my mind, or at least to reconsider my position on things. But he just knows that someone's going to snap a 15-second thing with no context, without, because all of his stand-up now has these preambles, right, where he's like, I'm saying this stuff because I want, like, it's important that people in our society have the freedom to say things and to offend anyone. And, what is equality? Shouldn't equality be the equal opportunity to be offended? Should anyone be exempt to offence? No. That would be his argument, right? But that's not the bit they're posting. It's the thing where he's saying something insulting about, whatever, and it's maybe taken out of context, and then it becomes a headline, and then that headline shared on Facebook 3,000 times.
The word you're looking for is the transgender community. He says something about the transgender community.
No. I don't necessarily mean transgender.
But that's where he gets most of his criticism from. Those jokes.
Yeah, well, and I think that sometimes people with his powers could maybe do to aim, to use those powers against society's most powerful people.
Yeah,
wouldn't be a bad thing. But I'm personally like, it's like this whole free speech debate, right? Like, I think it's really dangerous. I mean, I think, if you're inciting violence or hate against anyone, then that's a crime, absolutely. But I also just don't want to. I really prickle at kind of cancel culture.
Of course.
Like we're banning Don Brash, the former governor of the Reserve Bank, from speaking on campus at Massey. Why would you do that? You don't, like, I interview Don Brash fairly regularly. I completely disagree with the vast majority of the comments that he makes on Māoridom.
Yeah.
I don't ask him about Māoridom. I still think that he's a valid thinker, and he's, someone with valid experience and expertise that can be interviewed from time to time.
Yeah. And that's not what he's with you.
I interviewed Bob Jones.
Yep.
A few weeks ago. And remember, he had that court case, and he received a lot of criticism for having this court case against this young woman who started a petition saying that she found his comments racist.
Mm-hmm.
And he hadn't done any interviews, and I asked him for an interview, and he granted me an interview. And he said, first of all, I challenged him, I thought, fairly and robustly about the court case, and pointed out to him that if his whole thing was that people needed to take a joke, then he wasn't taking this joke. He was, he was being offended at someone being offended, blah, 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 and that he was a wealthy man, so why was he bothering to pursue someone through the courts when he knew they didn't have money? All that sort of stuff. I challenged him, I thought, robustly on those fronts. And I also asked him a couple of other things about his experience in politics and the economy. And, we played the interview, and everyone said, "Oh, Bob Jones, why would you dare have that person on? Blah, 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 blah. How can you give him a platform? Do better," all of that shit. And it was really interesting because I interviewed him on March 4th. And at that stage, New Zealand had one confirmed case of coronavirus.
Right.
And he said in the interview, he said, "I'm watching how this is unfolding around the world." And this is, I interviewed him in Wellington. We're still allowed to fly around and all that sort of shit. He said, "I've been watching how this has been unfolding over the last few weeks. We are about to enter a very serious recession.
Wow.
New Zealand will need to be bailed out, no doubt about it, certainly by the end of the year. This is going to have a massive impact." That was on March 4th. And, at the same time, other people in the public sphere were saying, "Oh, don't worry about it. This is nothing." And you can argue how prophetic it really is, right? There was plenty of information that this was going to be quite serious, but he still pointed out at that stage that he thought it was going to be really serious. And there weren't that many people in the public space at that time who were saying, this is going to be a really big serious, like we're absolutely hitting a recession. New Zealand's going to be in massive trouble. There weren't people saying that. And, I just thought it's so interesting because, there were all of these people who were saying, "Oh, how on earth can you have him on television?" And that was a really valid contribution at that time. Looking back to that now, it's like, oh, well, actually, maybe this guy who, in the eyes of many has done some really questionable things. And, a man who people consider a bully and consider really nasty. Some people consider a bully and some people consider really nasty. Maybe there is still validity in listening to what he has to say on some subjects, like the economy. Keeping in mind he's a billionaire. Like, maybe this guy knows something about how world markets work. I don't know. I just thought it was really interesting. Yeah.
It makes me think about, I was, to be honest, I was looking for a photo to put a view up because I always do that. And I came across your Metro magazine article from late last year. So I put that photo up because you look fabulous. And I read a bit in there as I was looking through and the conversation you were having about how important it is to ask the questions. And you talked about, if you still want to be in this game when you're 45, then you got to ask the questions and push the topics. I'm wondering how important that is. And what comes to mind is you talk about Don Brash because it seems like he wasn't there to talk about Māori issues, so he didn't talk about Māori things with them. I'm thinking about John Oliver was asked to host some kind of event that had Dustin Hoffman on stage. Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman, on stage. And it was quite soon after sexual assault allegations came along after him. And John Oliver said, "Look, if you ask me to do this, I will. But if you do, I'm going to ask questions." And so they had him do it. And then on the other hand, I'm thinking about the lovely Leighton Smith. And it may have been Helen Clark that he had on. It was a left-wing politician. And he didn't talk to them at all about climate change, which of course all of his listeners just wanted to talk to this person about climate change the whole time. And he actually said at the end of the interview, that's not what they were here for. We can have the climate change conversation with them another day. They were here for reasons X, Y, Z. And when I read that article, I skimmed that article from the Metro, I was just thinking about how important it is to ask the questions, to push those questions, whether the person is there for or not for that reason. And I'm thinking about Donald Trump as well, thinking about the questions that should be getting asked of him in various meeting rooms, and kind of just wanted to throw it at you going, you've sort of brought it up anyway, but the idea about asking the hard questions, the direct questions, the uncomfortable questions. I mean, Don Brash is a great example. I was in a podcast with him a couple of election cycles ago and asked him, how can the public of New Zealand trust him, when infidelities in his past and people closest to him couldn't trust him. Since then, I've had people tell me it wasn't necessarily an appropriate conversation, but he said there and then, that's a really fair question, and that's the question that the people are going to have to ask themselves, how trustworthy I am. So, what do you think about that sort of...
Interesting. I think that there is a time and place for questions, right?
Yeah.
So like I mean, like I like that John Oliver approach. If you've, I think that I don't think that maybe the John Oliver approach and the Leighton approach are necessarily either is right or wrong. But I would have thought that usually there is a pretext for interviewing someone in a context in which you're interviewing someone, and you know, if something incredibly newsworthy has happened, like the sexual assault allegations against Dustin Hoffman, then absolutely you should use your platform to be asking those questions. But at the same time, I think I don't think that, you know, I don't think that every time we talk about Te Reo Māori, we should be getting Don Brash's perspective on it. I don't know what qualifications he has to speak on that necessarily. I'm not saying we should oppress his opinions on that, or that we should never ask his opinions on that. But I don't think that we need to get him every single time we have the conversation.
But can I just let me ask something? So you don't get him on every time you talk about Māori, but when you have him on, do you talk to him about Māori? So you're not getting him on to talk about that, but like his Hobson's pledge, for example, I think is an abominable piece of crap. And the quintessential example of kind of white privilege and racism on some level, because it's basically saying the same thing they've always said: I want to make sure that it's equal under the law when it comes to race. And that's it. He doesn't want to make it equal under the law when it comes to wealth or gender or sexual orientation, just this one thing. And that's why I think there's the big hole in that sort of thing. So he has put his head above the parapet to talk about race. So my question is...
Well, the times that I would usually interview Don Brash, and I haven't interviewed him in ages, but the times that I usually talk to him are things on like New Zealand-China trade, monetary policy, the state of national politics maybe. Let's not forget, he was almost New Zealand Prime Minister. He was the leader of the opposition, okay? You know, the impact of negative interest rates or a negative OCR in New Zealand.
So that's quite narrow. That's quite a narrow conversation. So you can see.
Really, I mean, there's a lot of places you can go there, but I do think that sometimes with people like Don Brash, it's like, you know, there's a proposal from whoever that Te Reo Māori should be taught in all schools up to the age of 10. Let's get, you know, an esteemed kaumatua, and let's get Don Brash.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. No. It's like I used to be in a particular news room, and I've heard conversations around church issues come up, and I've literally heard one of the journalists say, "What crazy Christian can we get on board?" You know, it's not the. And there was one particularly 5 years ago, so they used to go to quite a lot. But I'm with you. I don't. That's actually sort of what we're talking about with Facebook. You know, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's controversial, it gets clicks. And it doesn't necessarily mean good content or good journalism, in my opinion.
No. There's not a lot of nuance, eh? No. I just think the world is such a complex place, and most issues are not binary. Like, most things are not black and white. Most things aren't just right or wrong. And the way that all of those things work is binary. Like, you're either for it or against it. It's either right or it's wrong. And that inevitably amplifies things, so that you just end up with these like hyper partisan positions on everything. You know, and it's amazing how tribal the divide is, you know, especially in places like the States, obviously, you know, compared to even 10 years ago. I think a lot of that comes down to Facebook. I've just started listening to is it a rabbit hole or wormhole or something, which is like a New York Times podcast about a guy who only 2 episodes in, it's so interesting. He watched the Christchurch shooting or had some relationship or saw the feeds or whatever, and realized that he and the shooter had been like engaging with the same material on YouTube. Wow. And for years, and you know, he'd been watching all of these Stephen Molyneux clips and all of that sort of stuff. And anyway, the tech guys at the Times and have gone back through his entire YouTube catalog from the start of 2015 or something like that, and kind of plotted the way that the algorithm has slowly made him more and more and more and more extreme in his views. And it starts off with just sort of like Joe Rogan and that sort of stuff, and then by the end it's like, I'm listening to Stephen Molyneux for however many hours a day, and like this white nationalist over here and all of this sort of stuff. And he said he had read the manifesto, and he just said he was like shocked with how much it was like this kind of reckoning moment. He's like, oh my God, I agree with so much of this in this manifesto, but this this appalling act has just been committed and streamed online. And I completely disagree with that. So how have I got to this position? And they actually have the guy who wrote the YouTube algorithm.
Wow.
Who has quit YouTube or was fired from YouTube in protest or whatever. And they talked about how in the early days of YouTube, the idea was to get as many clicks as possible. So they said, design us things but that incentivized clickbait headlines.
Yeah, sure.
So everyone would say like, oh, what's an eagle stealer kitten or whatever, right? And then you click on it and it wouldn't be an eagle stealing a kitten. And anyone go, oh, screw this. Oh, I'm sick of YouTube. And so they changed the parameters for the programmers. And this guy was, like a PhD in math from Johns Hopkins or whatever. And he said they changed it to value the length of time for which people watch or listen to YouTube,
right,
as opposed to the number of things they click on.
Right.
YouTube does the ads in the middle now.
Yep.
And he said it's completely changed the game because the sorts of videos that were promoted in the sidebar at the end of YouTube just like inevitably drove people to become more and more and more and more and more and more extreme in their views. And this guy who is the subject, and he said he was listening to YouTube or watching it for like 16 hours a day.
Whoa.
He'd have it in his pocket and he'd just be listening to like he'd have a Joe Rogan podcast or whatever for like 3 hours. And he just over the space of 5 years has become more and more extreme. And it's really fascinating because they go back to when the algorithm changed and they're able to plot it all through his YouTube history up to this point. It's scary, man, because like I say, it kind of plays on our foibles. It plays on our humanness. And yeah, we're actually as sophisticated as we think we are. We're actually very easy to manipulate.
And it's the boiling the frog analogy, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I always think I've got this little nephew, and I was talking to my sister the other day, or just before lockdown, and she'd taken him to the swimming pool for the first time. I said, "Oh, how was it?" She said, "Oh, yeah." He got really excited because there was an orange sign at the swimming pool, like the big orange letters on the wall. She said he was just completely mesmerized. He's 1 year old. He's completely mesmerized by this orange sign. When we were talking about it afterwards, I said, that kid's chemistry, that his physiology is exactly the same, almost exactly the same as a human being 30,000 years ago.
You're right.
A human being 30,000 years ago would never have seen that color, but for like a navel orange, maybe if you lived in the right part of the Mediterranean or Africa. Like, you would never encounter that color, that vivid orange in nature. Exactly the same thing applies with digital technology. Right?
Yeah.
Like our brains, our bodies, no part of us is designed for this kind of digital engagement. And yet we've made it a massive part of our lives. And we wonder why we're addicted. Like it's I find it really interesting.
And then we go full circle back to my teenager freaking out because there wasn't a phone to put in her pocket as she goes out to do her frickin' paper run. And you can see why, which is why, I sometimes I don't like talking necessarily about my kids or the what we do, because I don't want people to think it's like a yay, look at how we're doing it sort of thing. But we don't, like at night time, kids don't have their phones in their rooms, they don't have their devices in their rooms, they're out in the dining room. I bought them it was actually, I've said it twice already in this, there's a Simon Sinek clip, S-I-N-E-K, if people want to look it up, and look up millennials in the workplace. And he has about an 8-minute part of this conversation where he talks about how the brain interacts with technology. And one of the things he says is like, if you wake up in the morning and you look at your phone before you say good morning to your partner, then you've got a problem with technology. He gives all these examples, and he says, when him and his friends go out, one person's got a phone because, you might want to call an Uber, all that kind of stuff, but the rest of them don't take them. And one of the things he says is people use the excuse, I use it as my alarm clock. And he goes, buy an alarm clock. He goes, I'll buy you an alarm clock. So when we've seen that. So my three have got clocks in their rooms, little, $9 clocks from Kmart or whatever. And, when I crack the hammer and say at the table by 9 o'clock for school, please, they've got their alarm set and they got to do it. So it's trying to.
I keep my phone on do not disturb 24/7.
Oh, 24. That's interesting.
The only people who can break it, the only people who can ring me are my producer and my family.
Nice.
No one else. Even my close mates, they couldn't drunk call me or anything. It just goes straight to answer phone. And it never makes a noise, never goes ping, you've got a message, never lights up. And I'm still addicted, but I keep it like that all the time. Yeah.
But I guess what we got to do is, as you're saying, never seen that color, never had this technology, is now that we're here, it's not like we can go, well, I'm going to live outside the worlds of technology, because you can't. So it's trying to figure out how to, I was about to say circumnavigate, that's the wrong word, that means go outside, to navigate this path with all these things we have to deal with that our lizard brains shouldn't be dealing with. And I guess that's life, figuring out how to navigate this path.
Yeah, I don't have any answers, except that you just have to try and form habits. We know that habits are formed after 20 days or whatever.
Yep.
And so I just think that's the way you have to try and do it. You have to set rules like the ones you have about checking your phone before saying hi to your partner, or not having phones in kids' rooms, and all of those sorts of things. I've heard people say that in 20 years we're going to look back at this and be like, can you remember we just used to let kids have phones, just do whatever they wanted? That's unbelievable. It's just like giving kids, hey, a baggie of cocaine. Have a fun weekend, guys. It sounds extreme, but I don't know that it necessarily is. I wonder if in years to come we're actually just going to realize that this has damaged us so much collectively, and that we have to regulate it. Even if the all-powerful giants do everything they can to stop being regulated in a meaningful way,
Or it could go the other way. I was on the phone the other day with my 80-year-old father trying to help him set up Zoom, which is the easiest thing in the world. And if I'm honest, I was getting a little bit frustrated. 1,500 k's away, I couldn't just push a button for him. And my 13-year-old sitting next to me, and she went, "Dad, be patient. Just think in 40 or 50 years from now, when we've got phones in our hands and you don't understand it." And I'm just like, shut up. Don't make logical statements like that when I'm having a little frustration moment. Leave me alone.
Yeah. And look, halfway through this conversation, I was saying how fantastic it is to have these digital options during this lockdown. So it's not all bad.
Yeah.
But it's just it's that balance is really hard to strike.
Hey, before we wrap up, and we've been an hour and a quarter, so that's been awesome. Thanks for your time. There's a late one as well. My little time TARDIS here. I did want to just follow on from what we talked about 5 or 10 minutes ago about asking questions, because you have been involved in places where, there's been American politics when you were over there for 5 years, and American elections and stuff. What do you think the press should be doing with Donald Trump at the moment over there? What should they be asking him? And I know whatever you ask doesn't mean you'll get an answer, but it seems that there is a lot of, even from the media at the moment, kind of hand waving and trying to trap him to make him look like a dick. Not that he doesn't deserve that, perhaps, but rather than actually doing that fourth estate journalism job.
I disagree. I think there's some amazing reporting being done in America. Unfortunately, I think that the press there is perceived as being so partisan that, someone who religiously watches Fox News will simply not believe something that is presented in the New York Times. And the people who read the New York Times will simply not watch 5 minutes of Fox News.
Yeah.
I mean, Fox News is partisan beyond the pale. It's I watch it and I'm like, what the hell is this? But that being said, there's plenty of media that is partisan on the left as well. Maybe not quite as extreme. I mean, you can watch MSNBC, and it's like, you can see how a Republican watching MSNBC would feel the same way that a diehard Democrat would feel watching Fox News.
100%.
I actually think that Trump is Trump Trump is a genius in understanding news cycles and understanding how news works and manipulating the commercial models against themselves in America. He knows, like he boasts about ratings and all that stuff, but man, that guy knows how to get coverage and he knows how to divert attention. If it were me, I would be doing things like when Trump starts calling it the China virus, not biting. Let him call it the China virus. Just don't say anything. Why do you, like, they immediately turned that into the story, right? As soon as the China virus thing happened, it was like, why is Trump calling it the China virus? Is it racist for Trump to call it a China virus? And immediately it turns the conversation into the so-called liberal media, or at least the MSNBCs of the world being like, Trump is a racist. Trump is a racist. Well, we already knew that Trump was a racist.
Yeah.
But then you have the right being like, well, it is a China virus. It is a China virus. Blah, blah, blah. We called the Spanish flu the Spanish flu. How is this any different?
Yeah.
Classic liberals, and it's like, well, hang on. Instead of arguing this, why don't we apply some scrutiny to the fact that America's woefully unprepared for this global pandemic because partly because the president scrapped the White House pandemic response team and used the 6 weeks of warnings that he had from the CDC and the WHO to faff about rather than actually preparing himself. And the fact that America's woefully unsupplied when it comes to testing equipment and all of that sort of thing. Maybe we should be having public debates about whether or not to lock down as opposed to whether or not the use of China virus is racist. That's where I think. Like, it's so predictable. The moment I saw him say China virus, I was like, prepared for 3 days of China virus debate on news, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe debating whether or not we should be setting up field hospitals in New York, or whether or not we should be applying more scrutiny to the Centers for Disease Control. Why isn't the federal government doing more? I think it's. I was in New York when Ebola happened, and my kind of flatmate at the time actually went to fight Ebola in Liberia.
Wow!
And it was really interesting because the US was just totally led that. Like, Ebola is, was devastating and disastrous, and was a totally different disease and all of those things. But it was also a relative success and a great example of what happens when multilateral institutions, these big organizations and NGOs that are made up with with contributions from lots of different countries, when they come together and coalesce around a response, how effective it can be.
Yeah.
America led that. America absolutely was in the front, the front of funding that, of their health experts, all of that shit. America pushed that, right? Because they could see that it was what was in the global interest was in their interest as well.
Mm-hmm.
This time around, it's just like every country's on their own, and I think it's so interesting what a lack of a multilateral response there is. I mean, even down to things like Norway and Sweden having different approaches. It's really interesting to me that I think in the past, instead of threatening to cut funding to the WHO, I think I'm not saying that those institutions, the UNs and the WHOs and International Monetary Fund, those things are ever perfect, because of course they're not. They're deeply flawed.
Yeah.
But in the past, America really prioritized leading those institutions, and they've quite deliberately stepped away from that leadership now. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen when this shit really gets out of control in Africa, but
yeah, that's a terrifying
there are a million people
thought.
in America who have it. I can guarantee, once it hits sub-Saharan Africa,
yep,
rips through Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, I think Liberia has like 1 ventilator or 2 ventilators.
I think I heard that on TVNZ News that they have 2 ventilators. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hopeless, and is there going to be any appetite for America to go and spend, the world's biggest economy, to spend money helping out those countries? Probably not. I think it's really interesting. I think So come November, the next election over there, it'll be fascinating to see what happens with Trump.
Well, that's if there is an election. I mean, I don't say that as a conspiracy theorist, but if they go through another cycle, like I think the CDC said it the other day, of this getting worse come winter time, imagine if it doesn't go away and it's worse, and they've got it's the second Tuesday in November normally.
Yeah. But
who knows?
I mean, they have to get congressional approval to move the election date. And I can't see the House of Representatives being very enthusiastic about that.
Well, one of the things that American. You talk about the partisanship, and I think you're right, and with the media, but I mean, obviously you're partisan within the parties, but it's even the approach being partisan that thing that frustrates the crap out of me. And the perfect example at the moment is the whole Christine Blasey Ford versus Tara Reid situation. You know, Christine Blasey Ford accused Kavanaugh of an assault, and then the left basically got behind her, and people, including Joe Biden, used the believe all women. Tara Reid comes out with an accusation against Joe Biden. MSNBC basically doesn't even run the stories. CNN has only just started to run the stories when her mother is believed to be on the Larry King Live. So it's fascinating, even that side of it. And I personally think that's the worst. That feels like the worst of politics, where one political side will have an expectation that differs to what they do on the other. And I might have said this to you before, but I remember seeing it when National in the first decade changed to, when Labour in the first decade changed to National, and the defence ministers changed position from defence minister to, opposition defence spokesperson, and it felt like they literally left the script on their seats for the Skyhawks, because the same defence from the brand new defence minister was all the things that 6 weeks earlier the Labour defence minister was saying, and the same accusations were being made by now the defence opposition spokesperson. It frustrates me.
I mean, I think we're relatively lucky in New Zealand that we are about as stable as democracies get in the world at the moment. And I have been thinking about what would have happened if National were in charge during this crisis, and I'm not saying they would have done everything exactly the same. And certainly Jacinda Ardern is, a uniquely gifted communicator and public reassurer.
Yeah.
And she's amazing in the crisis as the front person for the response. But would a national-led government have really done that much differently? Probably not. Like our public service, fortunately, generally isn't very partisan, and I don't, whereas in America, I think like so much of the response to this is being drawn up on political lines, which is like a terrible, and Trump's threatening to withhold resources from states where he doesn't like the governance.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So I just think that we're relatively fortunate that we actually live in a place where, the differences between centre left and centre right aren't so extreme or venal that, that potentially tens of thousands of lives are on the line.
I've changed my position on how I think about the US after speaking to Steve Wrigley, who's currently living in New York as a comedian. Yeah, living upstate New York. He lives with his partner's family. Well, he's got his own place over there. But and I sort of had thought of this before, but he described really clearly that America is more like the EU than anywhere else. And so to paraphrase that out, you kind of go, okay, so the EU is independent countries with independent governments that have this governing body, which is the EU. So America is independent states that have independent governing bodies, which have a overarching organization being the federal government. And when you start thinking about it like that, you can see how, Georgia wants to open up, but California wants to shut down, and they can run completely separately.
The same thing's actually in Australia to a lesser extent. But it's this, when you have a federal government like that, But I mean, there's still the federal government still has a lot of power.
Yeah,
and they can at least. I mean, a great example in the States in this response is PPE, and so instead of getting a coordinated, centralized system for obtaining PPE, I mean, the logical thing, anyone with even just an elementary understanding of economics, so the logical thing here is to have a centralized body that goes to the suppliers in China and other parts of the world and says, right, we in our country need 300 million face masks, gowns, gloves, all of that sort of stuff.
Yep.
We need 300 million, so give us a good price.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. But instead, every individual state is going to those suppliers in China and going, we need 30 million of these things. We need 30 million. And that supplier goes, well, sorry, North Dakota, but Michigan needs 30 million and they're going to do it for $2 more per thing.
So it's the opposite. Yeah.
Well, so you've actually reversed your
Yeah.
you've reversed your bargaining power from being someone who's going in wanting this huge quantity to instead having your own states bidding against each other for the same resources.
Yeah.
This defies sense. But I mean, that's how they're running things at the moment. Again, we should feel very lucky.
And I think where I've come to on the coronavirus response here in New Zealand, I mean, I'm nervous about the level 3 a little bit. I'm nervous that in 2 weeks' time we're going to see an increase, and I hope we don't. But I know that Glenfield, Burgerfield is might be the exception rather than the rule. But for the last few weeks when we've been talking about this, my position has kind of been acknowledging that no one can get it perfect. Like, these guys will criticise the government here and these guys will support the government here. But if we have 2 columns of good ideas and bad ideas, we want to tick as many in the good and as few in the bad. And it feels like that's kind of what we've done.
I think scrutiny is important. But, relatively speaking, and the thing with this is no one really knows. Like, we don't know shit about the virus. You still can't even say with any authority whether or not, if you've had it, how long you're immune for, and all that stuff. We really don't know much about it. But I think we're pretty fortunate to have a scientific community who are respected to the degree that our decision makers listen to their advice. And for the most part, this is what I mean. Like, would National have made would they have made dramatically different decisions? Probably not. They probably would have made maybe we would have gone to a lower level slightly earlier, but probably not. I think for the most part we're fortunate in that respect.
And I think the other thing, we're talking about tribalism, just to wrap up, the thing I have enjoyed, and it's not that he got a bit of stick, but when it feels like Simon Bridges read the community wrong and started to criticise people through Facebook, or criticise the government, through Facebook, the community said, pull your head in, including National Party supporters. And that made me kind of think, I didn't want to see Simon. I mean, I know Simon well enough from working with him and actually having him and Jacinda as my correspondents on one of my old radio shows. I don't want to see him go through, unnecessary slack. But that said to me, we're not that place that no matter what the leader of Party X says, we're going to support them. It's something that he read it wrong. And the community said, no, you've got it wrong. And even though we're not a supporter of the other party, we are supporting the current climate of ideas they're putting out there, which I thought was really, really healthy.
Yeah, I do. I personally think that scrutiny, again, is important. I think actually Bridges has a really important job. And the select committee stuff has been really interesting. And there's been really good stuff to come out of that. But yeah, reading the room is important. And you're right. Like, we're not so, Labour till I die, National till I die. We're not kind of at that degree here, fortunately, and long may that remain the case.
Yeah.
No one has a monopoly on good ideas. No one has a monopoly on bad ideas.
And I think that's true, and that's the whole idea when we talk about, and I've done this before as a blog post about intelligent debate versus ideology. You got to acknowledge you're not always going to be right, so therefore if you always follow your ideology, logic dictates sometimes you're not going to have the best idea or you're going to be wrong. So we've got to be open to all ideas. That's how you get intelligent debate.
Yeah, I agree. So,
hey, Jack Tame, you are a beautiful man. How's the traffic looking at the moment?
Yeah, it's busy. It's level 3. It's not level 1, but it's also not level 4.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good to see. I never have I been more pleased to hear the sound of an angle grind. 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning, I was like, oh, here we go. But yeah, I hope that we get through. I hope you and the kids are on good ground in the coming weeks.
I'm sure we'll start speaking to each other at some stage.
Yeah.
You're back on ZB on Saturday morning if people pick this up live?
Yep. And then ZB Saturday morning, Q&A Monday night.
Do you know what you're doing on Monday? Is there any idea what the stories are going to come, or do they kind of come through the weekend?
No, yeah, we've still got various requests out and that sort of thing. Hopefully something comes through.
Thank you, sir. I love talking to you. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll catch up again sometime.
Yeah, look forward to it. Take care. Nice to chat, and catch you soon.